Hi, everyone. What a great way to start this event. It is my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to this film premiere event hosted by ActionAid and Global Witness, Extracted the People versus Vedanta. My name is Seema Joshi. I'm the Director of Campaigns at Global Witness, and I am your moderator for today's event. I'd like to start today by first introducing our speakers at the event today. It's my pleasure to introduce Jessie Chisi. Jessie is a Zambian filmmaker and human rights activist. She holds a bachelor's degree in development studies from Zambia Open University. She trained in film in Finland and is an alumni of the Berlinale and Durban Talent Campus. She is best known for her first feature in 2015, Between Rings, following Zambia's first female boxer. Secondly, I would like to introduce Maria Arena. She is a Belgian politician who has been serving as a member of the European Parliament since 2014. She is a member of the Socialist Party, part of the Party of European Socialists, and she serves as a chair of the European Parliament Subcommittee on Human Rights. Thirdly, it is my pleasure to introduce Julia Sanchez. Julia is the Secretary General of ActionAid International, a position she has held since March 2020. She was previously President and CEO of the Canadian Council for International Cooperation until 2018, and she is also currently Chair of Civicus, the Global Alliance of Civil Society Organizations and Activists. In addition, from Zambia, from Lukasa, I'd also like to introduce a few additional speakers today. I would like to introduce Brenda Sichupula and Esther Nalumbula. Both are representatives of the community of the Chingola people. Esther and Brenda are defenders who have been fighting a legal battle against Vedanta for years. They claim their children have been harmed by the polluted water, which even the doctor hired by the copper mine told them not to drink. Toxic acid runoff from the mine can be seen running into the river in the film in which they are featured, which will be following soon. These communities have spent 2 decades fighting the environmental pollution of extractive companies. I would also like to introduce Nalucha Gangaziba, who is the country director of ActionAid Zambia. And lastly, I would, the wonderful music that you've just heard is the well-known musician Leigh, Zambia's most enigmatic and enchanting Afro soul singer and songwriter. Leigh is an ambassador, humanitarian, and motivational speaker for various causes, including violence against women, and also child marriages and the needs of persons who are differently abled. So we have an incredibly interesting sort of guest speaker list today. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion. In terms of the format, we have 90 minutes and we have really 3 parts to this event. So first, I will pass it over to Chisi, and Chisi is going to introduce the film that she has directed, as well as speak about her experiences in directing the film. We will then see the film, Extracted the People versus Vedanta. And then lastly, there will be a moderated discussion really around the topic of corporate accountability, and specifically around new legislative proposals, or a proposal in particular that's advancing in Europe. So with that, I would like to not waste any more time, and I would like to pass it over to Chisi.
Good afternoon, everyone from different parts of the world. I'm so delighted to have everyone to come and see one of the most important films that I've gotten to work on. When I got this opportunity from ActionAid to follow this important story, for me, what struck me most was it was a story that was following women activists, and immediately I got so interested because I wanted to explore their world, and it led me to take on a journey on research and go to Chimlala village, where we spent 5 days filming this production. to my surprise, like the research of what had come across before actually being in the village became a reality. And it was shocking to find so much devastation which has been done by the mines for the people of Shimlala. You know, I went on through Brenda, of course, with her tenacity, you know, and her voice, what she's doing in the village. I followed like two women on their journeys and their impact. When I went to Brenda's village, apparently she had moved from where it was really devastated in search for another place where she could really start now her farming. And then to find, like when I went to see some of our cattle were really sick, and it was shocking to even see, you know, the pollution in the water and the cattle, what they were drinking. And beyond that, like she could not grow crops, you know, to the magnitude of what it used to be as a lifestyle in their village, because this is where they sustained their life. They could not grow crops anymore. The crops would burn out because of the residues, you know, contaminated residues coming from the mines. Furthermore, like it was so shocking to even hear a personal story that as a result of this impact, you know, her husband had to leave her, you know, and now she has to struggle alone with these kids around her because, you know, the men could not farm in those villages anymore. And then also what was really shocking was because people could not farm, you know, in different aspects around their farms. Now they resorted to cutting down trees. Me and Brenda personally, she took me to these areas, and Shimlala is such a beautiful place. I never seen any place as beautiful as that place. And to think like their life in that particular village was almost coming to an end, you know, because the main livelihood, which is the farming, the keeping of the cattle, which is used for sustainability of their lives, is deteriorating, was pretty much shocking. Then further, I went on to follow Esther's life with her children, her kids, who most of them are just like, you know, also their husband left them. They're now with their mother on their farm, and they don't even have anything to do. They can't farm anymore. They took me to these dry lands where literally, like, it used to be such a vegetarian place. Now it's all dried out. Crops cannot grow anymore. We went as further as, you know, walking long distances where they would actually draw water to then access what they would need water to drink. Takes so many kilometers to walk, about 20 kilometers. And for Esther and her family, sometimes, you know, they would resort to just drinking the water because it's sometimes the distances are far, you know, and her crops are also like her day, she can't farm anymore. What she used to know, like a vibrant family with so much, you know, farming going on is no longer there. It's just like a devastating sight to see. And just having to tell the story, I needed to get to that place myself to like really understand the depth of what it is. And I saw it for myself. The levels of poverty are unprecedented, like, and if they have to survive, they have to go to, you know, to the mines, you know, which is also very dangerous, to like just find small pieceworks that they could get something to buy food. And yeah, and as if that wasn't enough, like we followed this one stream, which is really contaminated. And me and my crew, we went there and we wanted to film to shoot these residues, you know, which were coming from the mining going into the villages. So there was this one dry land, which me and my DOP, we thought it was dry land, and my DOP dipped inside the dry land, we didn't know it was wet. All his shoes, you know, were left in, we had to pull him out. I had to get the camera and we pulled him up and he got out and he had so much mud up to his knee. And then what shocked us is like, you know, the following day started having this like rashes, you know, like, you know, around his legs. And it was so shocking. And then it came to a realization like, this is so deep, you know, and this is the same water that children bath, women use for cooking, you know, animals drink. And this is the experience I had. Like, I had to sympathize, you know, with their story. I needed to be very, when I was telling the story, like, I needed to sort of like put myself in their shoes, to be sensitive, because I remember them telling me like, oh, what's so different? You want to tell the story. We are tired of people just coming and get stories and say, you know what, we're interested because you're fighters. And I liked that they were not vulnerable in this story, because I was not interested in telling these women are weak or these villages are weak. We're interested about telling such an important story or an impactful story that's happening in a village, and these two women at center. They're not giving up for their land. They want justice. They want people to see. And they say they've been fighting for 10 years. They said, okay, fine, if it's the last bit of the fight, let's go, let's shoot the film. And I'm just so grateful that they gave me this opportunity to tell the story. They trusted me. She's like my sister. Even after the film, she would still call me, how are you? How are you? Esther would call me. I felt like for me, that was more important for them to feel like there's some people listening, some people like sort of like understanding the part of your situation. As you may know, like, women are the custodians of their own communities. You know, there's no development that happens without women. Okay, and there's no community with, you know, activities without women. And what's happening in Shimlala village, you know, affects the women more, because they're the ones who get to cook, who get to bath, you know, who get to use this water. And then the majority of the farmers, because they're thinking about their families and feeding their families. And these women, the two women, stood up for themselves, and they wanted justice, you know, which was long overdue, and they were tired. You know, they said, no, our people are dying. You know, they showed me like, they told me this like horrifying stories of how kids would drink. For a long time, they did know like there was this diarrhea which went on in the village, and people would actually die drinking water. At first, they did know, until they realized it was actually the very worst source of life became their source of death. And they really needed to now sort of like stop everything and say, look, where does our destiny lie from here? As a village, as a people, we need to stand up together, because we're gonna be finished or die. Anyway, I don't want to like preempt my speech, but I'm so grateful for ActionAid, for giving me this opportunity, for Brenda and Esther for allowing me and just opening up this space to tell the story. And yeah, thank you. I hope you enjoy the film.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I wondered whether Brenda or Esther wanted to add any sort of reflections or comments from their side before we move to the film.
Meanwhile, we find it very difficult because of water pollution. You know, when the source is not good, and you know, water is life. It was difficult to the community because we didn't really know our rights and where to and what we can do. So we could just see people come getting water, they go, no, we just want to test this water, they go. So we keep on calling them, what has happened to this water? They couldn't even tell us what they were finding that water. Luckily, there was one man who brought the results of that water. And that water was really contaminated with the iron, copper, and acid. That doctor even told us that you should not use this water for drinking or for animal consumption. Is not good. So from that time, that's how we mingled ourselves with the Caritas from Ndola Diocese. But still we saw that it was not actually the way we wanted it to. So as we were going on with some other activities, we find ourselves that we are also involved with the ActionAid under Ndola Diocese Caritas. So that's how they trained us in many other things concerning our human rights. So we stood in solidarity. You know, living in a community, it is not really all people who understand and who can even believe that what is real and not real. It was a little difficult. In fact, it was a difficult because mostly in the community, people are not much educated. So it was difficult to make those people to stand in a solidarity. So we started the meetings, women forums, mobilizing youth. We did a lot of meetings so that we come together, we stand for one thing. And through the ActionAid, we were lucky, they fighted for us to find lawyers. Yes, so as an activist, we used to mobilize, especially women, we were in front because we felt the pain. It's like you are having children, they are dying. That's what we were feeling. Like myself, it was not good. Even at this time, I'm still fighting because I'm an activist. So we are trying, and we tried by all means that the community come together, we stand in a solidarity to do a one thing, to have one voice, so that wherever we go, we have one voice. Thank you very much.
Pollution taina ayamba twale ikarafye bwino n'okulima twale erima fye bwino n'okulya fye bwino takuli n'omuntu okukyula awe teta akyule
ero nesabi lyalimo ilingi tatwale eshupikana okwipayo twakala twaipafe pambale awo twalengera fye mwaipayo esabi ilingi lyali fye bwino nangu lisabi lyaleba fye nangu muleria kufa fye tawe tuleria esabi
because lili akala bene balelima tulima otwapusana otwingi ino nshita abantu kuno balireko kulima afira balelima akali kaili apa so ifirandi yaba contaminated tapale fo twingalimapo so kulaba ati kuleka fefine tapalo fo wala ichi tapantu tapalo fo wala bika mwefyala chitanani kani ifyala afuma pantu nishuwala ona ula fya makayo bya ya kulima ero fo leli mapo tapali ifyala afuma
nomba twaisire ifika mu 2005 bintu vyaisire ambo kupena nomba kufuma apo nomba tamwava pwesabirako bati ili alondoloka ati yo twakwa tulelye sabi bwino nangu shani awe shebena tulaisanga ili afwa yo tedi nono lyasangwa aferingi ndawa pesa bina alifwa
Iyi pollution yadileta obwafi obukulu sana pantu yalingirana kufitekwa fyonse nga yafyala ni maybe akamwana kafwa so kwali kusamu kuchita discover kwebatikanshi yaye na menshi ng'ombe shirenwa bafina abantu balefwa na shene ng'ombe fo shire chitashani
tapani nepsha pantu iyo vachitire fye tapava nepsha chinge pantu vonse fye tiwaya fye nokulwala na vashikulu vene naine wina amenshi tunwa kwene yantu yalamba twaleti nga twanwa fya menshi aya vambi mumala kuchita dairi ewo vambi mumala okukalipa tetimuyate mwene okunu navene fye navo vene twaleti nga vaisa vamanyi vaisa mukumona amenshi twalevoka kuti aya amenshi naimwe vene nweniko ngefyo ifwe tulenwa valekana timulefwe kwakuti tufwe twatoka nchi ifwe nifwe mufwayo kwakuti ifwe tufwe vanafwa kufuma akaya papene vachitanani vajifwa vengi vantu napapipepala valilembele kuli vadokta vaku KCM so iyo valembele vatile va KCM lekeni ava vantu velanwa menshi aya muyesha muyevakanye kwenanga mulepa kuyata papya menshi mina 6 kilometers muleva mwivene kuti yafika nangu 5 kilometers ukwenda fyo kuyafika uko kwini
ActionAid has been with this community for some time, together with our partner, the Catholic Diocese of Ndola. When the community members raised the issue of trying to seek legal redress on the issue of water pollution under the Vedanta, the community members themselves didn't have the faith in the legal system within Zambia. So they thought maybe whatever will be discussed may not go according to what they want. So that is how the ActionAid started trying to find out ways and means on how best the company can be sued outside Zambia. When you look at issues that are happening around the mining communities, these are human rights issues. Our main focus here is to ensure that we improve the livelihood of the communities. That is one thing that we need to see. And also the injustices that are happening, the inequalities that are happening. So we also want the government also to take up the responsibility to understand what these community members are going through and also take up the responsibility as the government, the owners of these people, not to leave all the responsibilities into the hands of the mining companies who are just here to, for lack of a better term, they are more interested in the profit part than the human rights component.
efo tulekabira kuno community kushimulala tulefuaya omutende ubwere filafine wali kale abantu bekale filafine bale ikala kale
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, Jesse, for your work in that film. It's really, you've really used your talent in film to really capture the impacts, you know, on not just communities, but also, as you've said, how women in the community are really taking on the fight and really getting justice and seeking justice, you know, for the pollution and what's captured in the film itself. So thank you to Jesse and Brenda and Esther, both for your very powerful sort of roles and as they're captured in the film itself, and for your comments. I think this film and also the comments in addition to the film, it makes it clear that we need to change the rules for companies and particularly corporate behavior, and that we need to ensure that when harm occurs, that those that are affected by corporate operations have access to an adequate remedy and access to justice. For more than a decade, organizations like Global Witness and ActionAid have been strongly advocating for robust laws to hold companies to account when they destroy local communities and pollute the environment. For decades, from the tropical forests of West Africa to the Guajira Peninsula in Colombia, and in fact to every corner of the world, including many places in Asia, companies active in the European Union have profited from human rights abuse, environmental devastation, and climate breakdown. That's why we welcomed the announcement in April 2020 from the European Commissioner for Justice that he is committed to introducing a new law to hold companies to account and turn the tide on years of extractive and abusive practices by them. While we welcome the announcement by the Commissioner, it is absolutely essential that any law be truly effective. The law must require businesses to conduct due diligence along their whole value chain, including to their operations outside of Europe, and seek to prevent and mitigate their harmful human rights, environmental, and governance impacts. The law must ensure that those that are harmed by companies can take action to hold them liable when they suffer harm, so that they can be provided an adequate remedy. In this regard, we welcome the European Parliament vote in March in favor of robust legislation, which had strong cross-party support for a law that puts victims first and delivers a fair and sustainable planet. We're now waiting for the Commission to bring forward the proposal. We have noted that the proposal was originally due in June, but is now being delayed until after the summer. We've also noted that the Justice Commission has been joined on the file by the Commission for the International Market. Regardless of the delayed timeframe, the voices of citizens have been very clear, with over 500,000 people inputting into the Commission's public consultation, urging the Commission to deliver on a law that puts people and the planet before corporate profits. So at this time, we're going to open it up into the moderated discussion, sort of setting the stage with the film, but now with some additional remarks. I'd like to encourage all of the guests to put any, I see there's lots of comments coming into the comment box, which is really great. If you have any questions, please start to add those into the chat box as well, and we'll start to collect those. So at this stage, I would like to set the stage for MEP Maria Arena, who I introduced earlier. She holds a key position on the European Parliament Subcommittee on Human Rights. We asked MEP Arena what role the EU can play in holding companies accountable for their human rights and environmental impacts. And here is what she said. We have a video recording of her response.
Hello everybody, I'm sorry not to be with you today to discuss about this important issue of responsibility of businesses, but I wanted to give you this message after having seen this film on Zambia and the copper exploitation in Zambia. What I wanted to say is that it was really important to have this conflict minerals regulation that we voted in this European Parliament a few years ago and being implemented now on January 2021. it was important, but we see that it was limited regulation. First, because it is on conflict zone, and for example, in Zambia, Zambia is not considered as a conflict zone. Secondly, it is targeted to these 3 TG minerals, and copper is not covered by the conflict mineral regulation. And also because the environmental issue is not covered by these regulation. And fourthly, it is also because there is no sanction mechanism on these regulations. So it is why we are working now on this due diligence issue, due diligence regulation, due diligence initiative, to have all these being covered. First, we wanted to work all over the world in all sectors, because it is not only on minerals or critical raw materials, it is also on different issue. When it comes, for example, in the forced labor, in the Shanxing in China, for example. So it is for all sectors in all the countries all over the world. It is also with a sanction mechanism and with the capacity for remedy for people being victim of these abuses, and also because we need to have these environmental damage being covered by these new regulations. So for us, it is a new piece of regulation that we needed for businesses, European businesses, to work properly when they are outside Europe with the standards, the international standards when it comes to human rights and environmental rights. So I hope that we will have the opportunity to discuss a little bit more on this initiative, and we are waiting from the Commission to put this regulation on the table to have this discussion at the European Parliament as soon as possible. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you to MEP Arena for those powerful comments. So highlighting in her comments, of course, that some of the constraints by the EU conflict minerals regulation, specifically that in this context, for example, it would not apply to Zambia, it would not apply to copper coming into the EU, it would not, and there is no, it wouldn't apply to environmental impacts purely, and that there is no sanction provision. So some of the, I guess, limitations of that regulation, while effective for the minerals that actually are captured by the regulation, which are, I think, tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from conflict areas and conflict affected areas itself. So with that, I'd like to sort of move on to Julia. So thank you, Julia, for providing your comments today. My question is, could you please tell us about how you see the role of NGOs in supporting communities to organize and access legal support versus the role of governments in holding corporations to account?
Thank you so much, and thank you for this opportunity to share some thoughts on this really important event and video and experience. So at ActionAid, we are committed to supporting people's power. We believe in the power of people to make the changes that are needed, the transformations that are needed on the ground. And it's working through communities and supporting them to pursue climate justice in this case, and holding governments and corporations accountable where we believe we can do the most good. So we're always looking for ways to connect the local to the global. And this is exactly the case in Vedanta, where we were able to support local activists like Brenda and Esther to access justice through the legal system at the national level, and then with the international connections and repercussions that this case has. As has been made evident by the conversation you just had, governments are limited, unfortunately, often in their capacity to put in place even legislation that is solid enough to really hold corporations to account. So it is essential that people continue organizing and get the support to pressure governments to hold corporations to account, including through the legal mechanisms. We are very much wedded to the human rights-based approach in all our actions. And when we talk about a rights-based approach and how we support communities and people to realize their rights, legal structures are very much a part of that, right? And so using the legal mechanism, the court system, influencing adoption of proper legislation that will hold corporations, in this case, to account is really important.
Wonderful, thank you, Julia. You know, I really like how you've summed it up as connecting the local to the global, and sort of supporting and sort of ensuring people can lead that fight for justice, while also ensuring the regulatory accountability elements are in place with respect to the companies. Julia, you mentioned in your comments climate justice, and I was particularly interested as a follow-up question, and given the the climate crisis that we're currently in, and the Paris commitments, and actually the time to act is now, on many levels. Do you see a lot of corporate greenwashing in the climate justice space?
Very much. There is a lot of corporate greenwashing for sure. And as the pressure mounts, as you're mentioning, with the climate targets and the deadlines in the horizon, and there's pressure being put on governments and corporations to contribute to stave off climate catastrophe. We are seeing very creative ways of seeming like something is being done substantive around climate change, but not really being the case. So we've been doing a lot of research and documenting and denouncing around the net zero targets that many governments and corporations are adopting and announcing to the world. And we find that is a very, very dangerous path to be going, because it sounds good, and it makes maybe puts many minds at ease that, oh, okay, we are doing something about climate change. We do have these net zero targets being adopted by powerful players. But in effect, the net of that net zero is a loophole. It's a giant loophole for fossil fuel companies in particular to avoid scrutiny, because they say we're doing something. But if you really look behind what this means, it's actually delaying the real action that we need to stop climate change. And net zero has huge implications for communities like land grabs. It implies grabbing increasing amounts of land, enormous amounts of land, to be able to offset emissions. And it will drive growing hunger in the global south. So we've been analyzing cases like Shell's net zero plans, for example, and can see how they plan to keep polluting. So they're not changing their business model. They're not adjusting their business model. They're actually ramping up, in many cases, their production of polluting through polluting means. But then they're committing to plant vast tree plantations to offset the carbon that they're producing in their regular production. So, even though Shell is a Dutch company, of course, they're going to plant all these trees in the global south, not where they're originally based. And we've calculated that the land that they would need in order to offset the carbon that they're polluting through their regular business would be equivalent to 3 times the size of the Netherlands. So they would have to buy up or take away from other uses 3 times the size of the land of the Netherlands in order to offset their production. So this is not a solution to climate change. This is really greenwashing and distracting us from what really needs to be happening, which is a transition of industries into ecologically friendly, climate friendly technologies.
Thank you, Julia. That was, I think that you're so on point with with those remarks, and actually, as organizations, we need to really use our collective power to ensure that net zero is not used as a way to, as you said, just delay, as a delay tactic by companies, or a detraction for them to just stop carbon emissions. We are going to open it. So in terms of the speakers that we have, these are the key speakers, and I'd like to invite now questions from the audience for any of them. I also wanted to note that actually after the question and answer segment, we will be playing the music, which is intended, we're playing for 20 minutes, and it's intended to basically allow participants. I understand there's about 90 people who have joined onto this event to chat and interact with each other. So that's great. So I have a question, and it's to Nalucha, who is the country director of ActionAid Zambia, who hasn't spoken yet. The question is, what should the Zambian government be doing?
Thank you, Sema. For the government, there is really need to put in place elaborate legislation that protects local communities from activities of corporations such as Vedanta and KCM, as witnessed in this case. As much as we have the Zambia environmental management laws in place, in terms of its enforcement, it's quite very weak when it comes to enforcement, especially when dealing with huge corporations, largely due to issues of state capture and corporate power. So what we have witnessed is that there is not much protection on local communities when they're being faced by corporate power. And also most of the laws that we have in Zambia are more around environmental management, as opposed to also looking at issues of climate change and climate justice, as some of the actions that are being undertaken through business conduct and activities of these huge corporations operating in Zambia are largely also having an impact on the long-term climate outcomes for the country. But we see that as a country, we don't have substantial legislation that talks about climate change in Zambia. All our laws are around environmental management. And it's one of the areas where we are quite keen on working on as ActionAid Zambia, where we have partnered with the Ministry of Environment and Natural Protection to try and see ways how we can support government in coming up with adequate legislation and ensuring that local communities are also supported by the legislation that is put in place. So for us, we see a role for really government needs to enhance policy as well as legislative framework, but also operationalizing and implementation of the policy and legislative framework around environmental management is very key in the protection of communities such as the Shamlala community. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just looking at the chat box, and I know that people have so many questions. Please keep them coming. A question I have actually is for Brenda and Esther. I was wondering if you could speak to, I guess, the current state of the environment. You spoke about sort of alleged contamination. Is that still the case? Has there been a cleanup activity in particular? I was interested in wanting to ask that question.
Concerning the environment has not changed because the same lever we use is still going on with that contamination with the same acids direct. They are not doing them indirectly, but it's direct. And we are not happy because we see that pollution is moving to reach at the end of somewhere again. Other people will be also affected. Moreover, I don't know what I can say because the ActionAid Ndola Diocese, they tried to engage us with some stakeholders, including the ZEMA, but they wouldn't give us the proper solution or the decision that they can do as the local authorities. So we don't know how the government is thinking about us because that pollution is still continuously. And the environment, I don't know if the environment will change. It will not change because the pollution has not been reduced. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a shame. I have another question. This question is for Jesse. Can you speak about, the question is, what's next? What's your next project?
So my next project, the project that I'm working on, I'm actually in development with another female film director, Bekingoma. We're trying to work on a documentary that we're researching on genital mutilation for women, you know, because there's just this one particular interesting topic we found about a woman who was put under such degrading conditions. And then we started asking like the rights of women and their bodies. And this is something that, you know, we wanted to explore, because many times like women have been subjected to be objects of either somebody. So we got interested when we started doing the research. We learned actually, like, even though not so many women are talking about it, there are actually a lot of them like going through such harsh conditions, even their marriages. Yeah, so this is like my next project. So I'll let you know how it goes. We're just like in development at the moment and doing like a lot of research before we really zero down to what we want to tell.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, it's a very important subject, so we look forward to seeing that. I have a question to Nalucha again. The question is from Beatrice. The government currently owns KCM. If the pollution is still progressing, can we solely blame Vedanta for this?
Well, the government, yes, did a takeover of KCM, and I must say, from a business perspective, it was not a very good takeover, in the sense that it was harshly and hurriedly done and not following most of the legal or laid down procedures, which has also led to a lengthy legal battle between government and the owners of KCM Vendetta. And one of the things we have observed is that there has been slowed down in terms of operationalization of the mines, in the sense that we know that our government has not pumped in the necessary required resources to run the mines. And most likely what we foresee after the elections, it might be probably be sold to another mining firm. And one of the things that we have emphasized on the role of government is more to play a regulatory role than government having to play an active role in business. We see the role of government more to be a regulator in this case. Therefore, we are anticipating that they should be strengthening capacities around the Zambia Environmental Management Agency, ZEMA itself, in terms of how it regulates and licenses huge corporations that operate in the mining sector in Zambia. And not just in the mining sector, but also in the agriculture sector, as we are beginning to see also the setup of large farms in there. There is also need to capacitate the agency responsible for monitoring of mining activities in Zambia, which is currently very weak, or largely not even there in terms of enforcement, as most of these mines are able to get away with the pollution and the number of violations that they conduct in communities, largely because of the weak or non-monitoring at all, which doesn't exist. So therefore, our role is to continue engaging government in terms of them strengthening their regulatory role in this process, but also in doing so, there is need for adequate legislation, as I already stated, which needs to support their regulatory function. In terms of government trying to run the mines, for us as ActionAid, we've been very clear to say the government takeover was welcome in view of the various human atrocities that the previous owners of the mines were committing. But in terms of government running the mines is another issue, which we feel that our government should restrict themselves to the regulatory role, as opposed to being a player in the mining sector. With that, they need to find suitable investors so that their role is able to collect enough taxes from the mines, but also ensuring that the mines are also providing community beneficial ownership, and communities in which they are operating are also respected in terms of their human rights. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that answer, Nalucha. So I actually have another question for you. It's great. You weren't on the original. I think it was anticipated that you would get all the questions in the follow-up conversation. So one last question. What about the polluter pays principle here in Zambia? Can this be used to hold corporations accountable?
Well, it can be used to hold corporations accountable. However, as earlier stated in the opening of this filming by the local communities, you heard from them that the reason why they decided to seek justice outside the country was because of the lack of confidence in the judicial system in Zambia, and currently this continues to do so. In cases which are coming before our justice system, it seems to go towards the people with the money currently. So you tend to see power issues and power relations playing out. As much as we can try to look at holding them accountable to pay for the pollutions and other things, but largely where there's lack of monitoring, it poses a huge challenge. And also one of the things is that we've not seen, we don't have a big pool also of legal defenders that are quite fluent in environmental legislation in Zambia. Most of the human rights lawyers which have come up largely are still also operating in a sort of a business model, and there are very few. We have just seen the setup of Chapter 1 Foundation, which ActionAid supported in setting up not less than 2 years ago. And it's also quite heavy on issues of human rights, but more on political and socioeconomic rights as in our constitution. And we have also seen the setup of Lesotho Chambers, which is also quite heavy on issues to do with gender-based violence and providing that type of support. So largely we have not seen the coming up of environmental human rights lawyers in our country. Therefore, there are a lot of environmental atrocities which are being committed currently in Zambia, and companies are getting away with them because really there's not much room for litigation. Not that the justice system are not able to take on the cases, but we just don't even have the lawyers taking up the cases on behalf of communities. Usually they tend to channel out very large bills. We tried to take up one as ActionAid in conjunction with communities, but the bill we received was more than our annual operative budget as a country program. So we had to totally leave it. So those are some of the limitations as to why we are not seeing communities taking up actions. In terms of communities being aware and claiming their rights, they are trying, but I think the justice system in terms of the availability of environmental lawyers is still quite in its infancy stage in our country. Thank you.
Great. It sounds like very good progress. So thank you for sharing that, Malucha. So I have my next question is for Julia. The question relates to climate justice. Should climate justice campaigners feel hopeful given the landmark cases?
Yes, would be my answer. I mean, this is a long, difficult struggle, but every victory is a step forward, right? And because it's been so difficult, we don't have a lot of precedent. So it's almost like every case is a precedent, is setting precedent. And that's important that we start moving forward. We're really, really encouraged by a very recent case, for example, which does exactly that, which moves the conversation in the right direction, which is the case against Shell, where a court ruled just a couple of weeks ago that the company had to reduce its emissions in line with the Paris agreements. So that is a historic ruling. We've never had anything like that before. And, you know, surely it won't be, you know, an open and shut case where now this will just happen. You know, I'm sure the company has already got its team of experts looking into how, you know, they can if there are any loopholes and how they can get through, you know, with minimal reduction perhaps of the emissions. However, it is sending a very strong message, right? That surely all companies have to listen to, that it is no longer okay to pollute without any restrictions and to get away with it, and that there are mechanisms and there is a precedent where a court will say, to a company, you cannot continue doing this, you have to reduce your emissions. So it is important, and that has only happened because of the mobilization. I mean, in this case, there were more than 17,000 plaintiffs, there were lawyers. The point that Nalucha was making is very important, that we have the right technical expertise that is available and willing to engage and support these processes. And there were a whole bunch of NGOs that came together, that pooled their resources and their strength and their voices to bring this case forward. ActionAid was one of those NGOs in the Netherlands, working very, very hard to make sure that this case was heard. And then, of course, very, very pleased with the result. So it is a step forward. It's not perfect. It doesn't solve all our problems, but cases like that are definitely showing us that it's possible, that we can move the needle, even though it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of collaboration, a lot of focus, resources, a lot of time from activists, lawyers, and the likes, but it can be done. So this is definitely not the time, especially when we see cases like that succeeding. It's not the time to give up or to feel demoralized. On the contrary, we've got a lot of work to do, but we can succeed when we work together.
Great, thank you, Julia. I think that's such a great way to finish the question and answer period, and I couldn't agree more with your assessment there. So, I mean, in closing, I'd like to thank the speakers and all the guests for attending this film premiere, and the discussion afterwards. It's been really interesting, and I've really enjoyed hearing the voices from Brenda and from Esther and Chisti. Really, thank you so much for using your talent to create these films to really communicate in a way that's just so helpful for advancing rights-based work more generally. I wanted to just say as a note before closing that Vedanta was given the opportunity to comment on the allegations that you've heard today at this event. However, they did not respond. And for those people who are interested in sort of keeping, I guess, posted on this event, and or being in touch, with some of the speakers, please visit the social channels at ActionAid, at ActionAid Zambia, at Global Witness. And I know that Chisti also has a Facebook page, I believe, and as well as sort of an Instagram to basically sort of keep an eye and keep watch of the great work that's been doing in this space. So in closing, I wanted to encourage everyone to stay on the line. Feel free to stay. Wezi, there will be music. Wezi, Zambia's this well-known Afro soul singer and songwriter. And from my side, I just wanted to thank everybody for their time today and joining, and really for the contributions from the speakers in particular, and again for the film. We need more excellent work like this. So thank you very much.